Soup in the summer can work if it's like a light seafood soup.
Right. If you're on Cape Cod or up in Maine and you had, fried fish and fried scallops and fried oysters for the last 5 days, like this would be a nice change of pace. I haven't yet gotten around to the mussels, but the mussels are calling.
Yeah. Julia would be enjoying this with a glass of wine. It's not even noon here. It may be 5 o'clock somewhere, but I'm not ready for wine.
Look at this magnificent head. It's from a giant cod. And here is a hake frame. We're going to do fish soup and bouillabaisse today on the French Chef.
Hi, I'm Amy Traverso, and welcome to another episode of GVH's You and Julia at Home. When I think of summer in New England, I think of seafood. And so, today we're going to be making one of Julia's classic dishes, which is bouillabaisse. This is a simple fish stew. It's like making soup. It's about as easy a cooking method as you could possibly find, and it's actually quite quick. But you just need to assemble your ingredients. You really can make this dish from anything you can get at your supermarket. I also have a slightly different mix of seafood. I have shrimp. I have some really lovely bay scallops, which are harvested. These came from off of Nantucket, and we call them the bubble gum of the sea because they're very sweet and have a really nice chewy texture. And then over here I have some Prince Edward Island mussels. I have halibut. And then I have this snapper, which is not local, but it was the only whole fish that I could find at my supermarket, so I went with that. So I'm gonna get my fish ready first thing. So I've got this snapper now. I already cut off the head and the tail to put in the stock, but this is the part we're actually gonna eat. So I'm gonna take off the fins of my snapper. There's a little part here. Notice my very high-tech kid scissors that I'm using for this. I like these small scissors because I can kind of get in there and feel where I am, but use whatever kitchen shears work for you. Okay, and then there's these fins along the sort of back, the spine of the fish that need to be removed. So we do not want to be eating that. I'm going to switch over to these shears because I'm getting to a part that's just a little bit harder. So now my fish is ready. Now this fish does have bones, but we've removed the fins. This is the only fish that I will have in the stew that does have bones. Julia made it with all fish that had bones, but I'm using mostly fillets and shellfish. I loved watching Julia make this dish because she really just whacked some of the fish to cut through the bones. Since I only have this one snapper that has bones, I do want to cut it into 2 pieces to make it easier to eat. I don't have a proper cleaver like Julia uses because I don't do a lot of butchery at home, but I have this Japanese vegetable knife, which is the closest thing I have. So I want to just give it a whack. I'm probably going to need to whack it a couple times, but I just want to cut through in honor of Julia's technique. So here we go.
Wham!
All right, I made a little progress there. I'm going to give it another there. All right. So there's 2 pieces. I'm actually going to do it in 3 pieces to make them bite-sized. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. There. All right. Now I've got my halibut. I'm going to cut this into bite-sized pieces. This was a halibut steak that I took off of the sort of cartilage, and I want nice chunks. So this is a nice meaty fish that doesn't fall apart like sole or something more delicate would.
And what you always want, if you can, is to have some gelatinous fish, of which halibut is one, and some of the flounders are gelatinous.
Okay, so my fish is all prepped. I've got my mussels, my shrimp. I've peeled my shrimp already, and we're going to use those shrimp peels for the stock. So now we're going to head over to the stove and start cooking. So I've got my soup pot over medium-high heat, and I'm going to add half a cup of olive oil. And then I'm going to add aromatics. Our aromatics in this case are onion, which I've sliced. All of this is going to be strained out at the end, so you don't have to worry about chopping everything perfectly. I've got my leek, and this is just the pale parts of the leek. And then I'm going to add my fennel. Just chop up the bulb. And then I have my fresh basil. I actually took the leaves off the stems because the stems have a lot of flavor and they're really nice to add to the base. And then just some salt and pepper. I'm going to start with about a teaspoon, roughly, and some pepper. I'm going to stir this up over medium-high heat until it softens and the onions turn translucent, which is 5 to 6 minutes.
It's already beginning to smell wonderfully like Marseille.
I'm just going to do both fennel seeds. That's probably a teaspoon and a half to my aromatics. I'm also going to add some garlic. I think at that time it was still a somewhat exotic ingredient. All right, so this is starting to smell fantastic. So now I'm going to add some tomato. Julia used chopped fresh tomato. I'm using canned chopped tomato. I have a large can here. I drained most of the liquid off, and this is just mostly the actual tomato bits. Now I'm going to add the ingredient that Julia didn't use, which is white wine. White wine tastes very good with the fish. And this is just about 2 cups of white wine. Pinot Grigio is a go-to wine for me to cook with because it has a nice kind of minerality in general. It just isn't a heavy oaky type of white wine. So I've got my halibut kind of cartilage here. I've got my fish head. Now, while I was trimming the shrimp shells from the shrimp, I saved all the juices. So this liquid here is shrimp juice. That probably doesn't sound very appetizing, but it will taste delicious in the broth. So I'm extracting as much flavor as I can. And finally, to make this a soup, we need to add water. So I've got about 2 quarts of water here.
Our water, we want just enough to cover our fish heads.
And now I just want to bring this up to a boil and let it simmer for 40 minutes or so.
And the reason you want it to boil is so that the olive oil is completely mixed up with your soup stock.
Then you will strain this into a pot, which is what I have over here. I made this last night, and we're going to use this as our liquid for poaching the fish. So I brought my fish over to the stove, and just like Julia, I'm going to cook it in 2 batches. So I'm just going to add my halibut in here.
And then you just put your fish in, because it takes these big pieces and the more gelatinous ones a little longer to cook. It takes about 10 minutes in all.
So we're going to let that go at a nice simmer for 5 minutes. I can see that the fish is about halfway cooked now, so I'm going to add the rest of my seafood.
You actually can just put in anything that you like.
I'm going to add my mussels. Okay, so let's give that a stir, and we'll let that go another 3 minutes, and then I'll add my scallops last of all. This is just a nice, gentle simmer. I really like to cook the fish at this temperature. It's gentler and fish is more delicate, so it's a really nice temperature. We are just going to add the scallops last but not least. These are going to go in for just about a minute. They cook so quickly. All right, my seafood is ready and I am ready to plate this up. My last step is I've just chopped up some of the basil leaves and I'm going to throw those in there for some color and wonderful fresh flavor. Okay, this smells heavenly. I'm going to bring Scott in here to taste it. We're going to plate it up with some croutons, which are just sliced French bread that I toasted, and we're going to enjoy ourselves a bowl of bouillabaisse. Thank you for joining me as I made bouillabaisse today. I hope you will try it, and if you do, please be sure to tag at GBH on all social media. We want to see what you're making at home. And remember, as Julia always said, there is no end to imagination in the kitchen.